All right, so I was still at school and I couldn't have gone anyway, but it still hurt. And when Dave came back for short periods of time, he had amazing stories to tell and fantastic photos of LA. He had cool vintage clothes, a golden Californian tan, and possibly, just possibly, the greatest mullet the world has ever seen. Any American rock band would have killed for the mullet that David so carefully cultivated. It was sort of blonde and kind of brown. It was messy at the front and long at the back. It was curly in places and straight in others. It was dry as a bone and split all over, but it was magnificent in all its glory. After a few more years of milking Los Angeles for all it had to offer, David decided it was time to bring the mullet on home. He left Robert behind in LA, where Robert has stayed ever since, and came back to London to start a new chapter in his life. After some while, he began to miss the good times, so with his friend Gary Smith, he set about organising parties in different venues all over London. They started out on dodgy boat discos and ended up in trendy nightclubs, but this was only a small part in the master plan. Eventually, with some financial input from another friend, Terry Crawley, they bought a bar in their favourite holiday destination, Lindos, on the Greek island of Rhodes, and the good times were back in business. And this time, things were different. I'd finally come of age, and Dave wanted me, Bernardo boy, to come with him, no longer to be left alone in rainy old England with my parents. So off we went for 7 years of fantastic times in the Greek sunshine. Now, as many of you know, David, for a man of his considerable old age, likes to keep himself fit. From an early age, Dave was involved in many sports, some of which, like football, he excelled at. He gained different belts in judo, is an excellent surfer and competent swimmer with life-saving skills. He's always had a good knowledge of weight training and how to keep his body toned. And so it was that there in Lindos, at the age of 30, quite some time ago now, at the very peak of his physical prowess, rippling with muscle and a six-pack that any Olympian would be proud of, that David sustained what is now infamously known amongst friends as the back injury. Yes, I can tell many of you know what I'm talking about. Whilst living in Lindos, David took up water skiing, and one day, after what seemed like an innocuous tumble, he emerged from the water a different man. Something was not right, and over time, Dave's back began to get worse. He began to suffer niggling back pain on a regular basis, and normal everyday movement became a thing of the past. But to Dave's credit, he chose not to talk about his back problem with anyone. He chose to talk about his back problem with everyone. If you saw Dave walking down the street and cheerfully greeted him, "All right, mate, how you doing?" you got 25 minutes of the back injury story. If you called Dave up and said, "Hello, Dave, fancy a few drinks tonight?" he'd say, "What, with my back?" And you'd get 25 minutes of the back injury story. You know what I'm talking about. If you rang up Dave and said, "Listen, mate, it's just a short call. I need to ask you a quick question, then I've got to dash because my dinner's on the table and the kids are screaming the house down," you got 25 minutes of the back injury story. In full, nothing left out. The back injury story was a juggernaut that could not be stopped. No time constraints, no spatial limitations, no awkward situations could stop it being heard in its entirety. When Dave pressed play on the back injury story, there was no pause and no fast forward. There was only a stop, and that didn't get pressed until 25 minutes later. Now, don't get me wrong, ladies and gents, I'm not trying to belittle this situation, as David did have a legitimate back injury that caused him pain and discomfort. He went to see many different physicians and doctors, seeking a cure, all to no avail. He turned to osteopaths and chiropractors who gave him x-rays and MRI scans, but none could quite put their finger on the problem. Medication was given and surgery was threatened. Dave, in his desperation, turned to alternatives: acupuncture, homeopathy, physiotherapy, flotation tanks, a faith healer. One doctor suggested that Dave's spine was compressed and needed stretching out by hanging upside down like a bat for 1 hour each day. Dave duly purchased the £300 apparatus to do this on and set about it with vigour. Sadly, ladies and gents, this also did not cure the problem, but had the unfortunate side effect of expelling all unwanted air from Dave's back passage for the duration of the hour. Luckily, he did it with the windows open. Now, you may think it's strange to take such weird and off-the-wall advice, but Dave has a history of this. He sprained his ankle once in Lindos, and a slightly, shall we say, kooky Italian friend of ours told David that to make it better, he should soak his foot in a bowl of warm water filled up with chopped onions. The more, the merrier. Dave duly sent out and a pound of onions was produced, chopped up and put in a bowl of water, closely followed by Dave's foot. And you know what? The next day, he still had a sprained ankle, but it stunk of onions. That's not all. Dave's got a dust allergy. He read somewhere that if you flush out your nasal passages with salt water, it can solve the problem. But not just any old salt, oh no. Salt from the very deepest, darkest Peruvian salt mine. This can only be bought from a shop in Kentish Town where you knock 3 times on the door and ask for Abdul. After purchasing said salt, you take the salt home where you have to boil it up in an authentic Egyptian teapot. And when it cools down, then, and only then, can you snort it up your nasal passages via the tea spout and flush out any unwanted dust. And you know what? After 3 months of doing that, it actually worked. Anyway, I digress from the back injury story, which is something Dave never did. So Dave became an expert on back pain. What he didn't know about the human spine and its ailments, quite frankly, wasn't worth knowing. If you foolishly mentioned that your back was a little bit stiff, he'd have your shirt off in no time, prodding around until he diagnosed you and sent you off to one of the numerous specialists he had seen. Now, none of them could cure Dave, but they could sort out your muggy little bit of back pain, no problem. Over time, Dave came to realise that if he wanted to sort out his back problem, he'd have to do it himself. A lifestyle change was in order. With the help of another specialist, probably the best one yet, David began to put together a routine of stretches and exercises to do as soon as he woke up in the morning and just before he went to bed at night. Slowly but surely, David's regime began to pay off, and his back became more flexible again and movement returned to normal. Unfortunately, his days of lifting weights and pumping iron were over. The bulging biceps began to fade and the six-pack turned into a party 7. Until eventually his body became the bag of skin and bone that we see before us today. But, ladies and gents, David can bend over and tie his own shoelaces now, and although if you asked him to help you with any heavy lifting, miraculously the back pain does seem to reappear. Now, if any of you do suffer with any back problems, you'll be pleased to know that David's exercise regime is now out on DVD. And it's called Stretch With Me by David Hockley, $14.99 on Amazon. And if you order that now, you will get a copy of Dave's self-help book, Living with Hypochondria. Now, the hypochondria, I haven't even actually got time to put it in this speech. I just have, if you insist, I'll just touch upon it. David goes to the gym 4 times a week. He eats a healthy, balanced diet. He drinks in moderation, doesn't smoke, and most certainly doesn't do drugs, and is possibly the fittest man of his considerable old age, that I know. And yet, he can conjure up an illness, ache or pain from the merest whiff of discomfort. Along with the bad back, he has the constant neck pain, probably caused by looking over his shoulder too quickly in a full-length mirror. Then there's the shoulder pain twinges, probably caused by the weight of his hypochondria that he's been carrying around all these years. The mysterious aching wrist. He was single for quite some time, ladies and gents. And then there's the housemaid's knee. Not a made-up ailment, but genuine housemaid's knee diagnosed by a real doctor. Not a hang upside down, soak your foot in onion, snort salt up your nose type of quack. No, but a bona fide certificated student of medicine. Now, I had housemaid's knee once. The doctor gave me some anti-inflammatory tablets, and within a week it was gone. Never to be heard of again. Dave, 3 years he's had it. 3 years. He has actually changed medical science. People visit Dave's doctor and say, "Doctor, I've got a bit of a swollen knee," and the doctor will say, "Well, sounds like housemaid's knee. I'll give you some anti-inflammatory tablets and it should be gone within a week." Or it could be the much more serious condition now known as How's Dave's knee, which could last for years, if not infinity. I mean, housemaid's knee. If you're going to get an affliction, you get something a little bit rock and roll, wouldn't you? Like gout.